Our final researcher presenting is Dr. Valerie Keller, who's a physical therapist with a PhD looking at research on gait in Parkinson's.
First, how's the volume in the back? Okay, good. Again, my name is Valerie Kelly. I'm a physical therapist and a researcher at the University of Washington. And first of all, thank you for spending this lovely day with us and sticking with us for the stretch. Exercise is near and dear to my heart as a physical therapist, and I think there is plenty of evidence at this point to help us understand that exercise is medicine. We know that it helps to maintain function for people who have Parkinson's disease. It's non-invasive, which is not to say that there aren't side effects. We've all had aches and pains. We've strained muscles, so exercise does have some potential side effects. But it is an intervention and an activity that is more non-invasive than some of the others we've spoken about today. There's a lot of basic research trying to understand how and showing promising results in how exercise can impact underlying disease processes, improving blood flow, circulation in the brain, reducing inflammation, improving brain health through things like improving neurotrophic factors. There are scientific reviews that I've pointed you to, but the American Parkinson's Disease Association also has some lovely resources, both online and in the atrium out front, and I suspect many of you have taken advantage of those already. My goal is just to give a high overview of a few different non-pharmacological studies with which I'm involved, most of which do involve some sort of exercise. The focus is on walking, on gait, and I see a few friendly faces in the audience with whom we've already had the fortune of working. So the first study we fondly call the GenX Study. I am of the Gen X generation, so that was sort of personally satisfying to me. It's funded by the Veterans Administration and has been conducted in collaboration with Dr. Mata, who is on the cover, and Dr. Zabadian, and the incomparable James Phillips, who's here. We're trying to understand the effect of a small number of genotypes or genetic variants on motor learning and cognitive changes in response to a walking program. We have a second study, really a study that in many ways came before and is now following on the heels of the GenX study, which is interested not in the effect of genetics, but in the effect of any potential cognitive impairments on the response to a walking program. And here we're specifically interested in how cognitive impairment might influence motor learning. Most walking programs, not all, but many take place on a treadmill. And on a treadmill, you're at fixed speeds, you're walking in a straight line. We do want to understand how that type of walking might be affected by a walking program, but the reality is, just to get into this room today, you were navigating through narrow environments and turning and stopping and starting. So we also are interested in how our training transfers to other more complex and more real-world walking tasks. This study was initially funded with some pilot funding from the National Institutes of Health and is now funded through the University of Washington. To give you a sense of what these studies involve, the GenX study is a 10-week walking program. We ask people to come in 2 times a week for 10 weeks, working with physical therapists at the Veterans Administration. In the early part of this 10 weeks, the first 2 weeks are really focused on how people are walking. We're giving a lot of cues to really improve the quality of walking. And then as the training goes on, we try to really increase the aerobic challenge, the intensity. In our second study, it's a much shorter study. We are just looking at a 2-week program, asking people to come in 3 times a week to the University of Washington, and they're working with physical therapists and physical therapy students who work with me at the University of Washington. And here the focus is really on quality throughout those 2 weeks. We assess the impact of these different training programs on walking in different ways. For the first study, the GenX study, we're asking people to wear inertial sensors. Many of you may have worn these for other research studies. We just put some sensors on the body. We ask you to walk across the room or stand still. In the second study, we are putting a whole set of reflective markers on, and so you can see a little bit of the markers that we use. If any of you have ever seen, this is the kind of motion capture technology that's being used in Hollywood. So I always say I have a backup plan. In the first study, we also do look at cognitive function and how cognitive function responds, and that's largely paper and pencil, but some computerized tests. If people are interested in these studies, we are currently recruiting through the Washington State Parkinson Disease Registry. There is a table out front. Both studies share some similarities in terms of what might be a good fit. So we're primarily interested in recruiting people who can walk short distances, about a lap around the track without assistance, no dementia or history of deep brain stimulation, no health conditions that could impact participation in an exercise program, so particularly a moderate to high intensity program, so we just try to be mindful of any heart problems that people might have. And then we do recognize that while these are exercise studies are relatively non-invasive, they are intensive, and so they require quite a few visits. About 22 visits for the GenX study, about 8 visits for the cognitive study. One other study that I'll briefly tell you about is a study for people who might be experiencing any symptoms of freezing of gait. And this is a study that's being conducted at the University of Washington in our Amplifying Movement and Performance Lab in collaboration with researchers in the College of Engineering. So as many of you may know, freezing is a symptom in which people have just brief difficulty with walking, and there are certain visual environments that can exacerbate freezing. I saw this lovely sculpture outside today, and I just couldn't pass by without stopping to snap a photo. Doorways are one of those environments that can sometimes exacerbate freezing. And so the first study that we did with virtual reality, we just wanted to understand if we could create virtual environments. In the physical therapy clinic, I don't often have the doorway or the hallway or the crowd that might often trigger freezing for people who have Parkinson's disease. But this is one place where maybe virtual reality can help us create that environment. So we're wrapping up a study that shows these virtual reality environments do actually tend to cause some of the same gait impairments and even freezing, which means that maybe then we can use those virtual environments for treatment. And so that's what we'll be doing in the second study. It's just a single visit, so only 3 or 4 hours, but just a one-time visit. And for this study, we're particularly looking for people who are experiencing freezing of gait. If you use some assistive device or if you need help from a care partner, that's absolutely fine. All of these studies, as I said, are recruiting through the Washington State Parkinson Disease Registry. And so if you're interested, there is a sign-up in the atrium, or you're welcome to contact me directly. And there are flyers at the WPDR table, and so you are, again, welcome to pick one of those up and contact me directly. I'm the last speaker today, so the one other thing I did want to do is, again, thank all of you for attending. This research that we've all discussed and described today is research that could never be done without you and people like you who are willing to take the time to participate. And so we truly appreciate that, and we hope you'll continue to be engaged with the research we're doing here locally.